The stagecoach wheels kicked up dust along the rutted road leading into Wood River, Nebraska, and Beatrice Zimmerman pressed her face against the window, watching the small frontier town materialize through the haze of late summer heat in 1878. She had traveled 3 weeks from Philadelphia, leaving behind a failed engagement to a banker who decided he wanted children of his own blood, not the orphans she dreamed of caring for, and her heart felt as empty as the prairie stretched out before her. The advertisement in the eastern newspapers had been simple: schoolteacher needed in growing Nebraska town, room and board provided. Beatrice clutched her carpetbag tighter as the stagecoach lurched to a stop outside the general store. At 24 years old, she was starting over completely, and the weight of that decision pressed against her chest with every breath. "Wood River, miss," the driver called down, his weathered face kind beneath the brim of his hat. "Welcome to Nebraska." Beatrice stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk, her dark blue traveling dress already coated with a fine layer of dust. The town was smaller than she expected, consisting of a main street lined with wooden buildings that looked like they had been hammered together in a hurry. A saloon stood at one end, a church at the other, and in between were the necessary establishments of frontier life: the general store, a blacksmith shop, a small hotel, and what appeared to be a doctor's office. "You must be Miss Zimmerman." A woman in her 50s approached, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, her dress practical and worn. "I am Mrs. Henderson, the mayor's wife. We are delighted to have you here. The children have been without proper schooling for nearly 6 months since our last teacher married and moved to Omaha." "I am pleased to be here," Beatrice said, though uncertainty churned in her stomach. Everything felt so vast and open, so different from the narrow Philadelphia streets she had known her entire life. "Let me show you to your lodgings above the schoolhouse," Mrs. Henderson said, taking Beatrice's arm. "Tomorrow you can meet the children, but tonight you should rest. The journey from the east is exhausting, I know." As they walked down the dusty street, Beatrice noticed a wagon pulling up outside the general store. A man climbed down from the driver's seat, tall and lean with sun-darkened skin and dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. But it was not the man who caught her attention. It was the children who tumbled out of the back of the wagon like puppies from a basket. 1, 2, 3, Beatrice counted under her breath, watching as they kept coming. 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 children, ranging from what looked like 14 years down to perhaps 3, all with the same dark hair and tanned skin, all dressed in clothes that had been mended multiple times. They surrounded the tall man, chattering and pulling at his hands, and Beatrice saw him smile, the expression transforming his serious face into something warm and almost boyish. "That is Fletcher Jenkins," Mrs. Henderson said, following Beatrice's gaze. "Tragic story, truly tragic. His wife died bringing the youngest into the world 4 years ago. He has been raising those 7 children alone ever since, working his ranch and trying to keep them all fed and clothed. The older ones help, of course, but it is no life for children, growing up without a mother's touch." Beatrice watched as Fletcher hoisted the smallest child, a girl with braids coming undone, onto his hip while simultaneously listening to what appeared to be an urgent story from one of the middle boys. His face was patient, tired but patient, and something in Beatrice's chest tightened. "Does he manage?" Beatrice asked quietly. "He does his best," Mrs. Henderson replied, "but a man cannot be both father and mother, no matter how hard he tries. The older girl, Caroline, she is only 14, but she has had to be the mother to all the younger ones. It is too much responsibility for a child. And Fletcher, he has aged 10 years in the 4 since Martha died." Beatrice continued to watch as Fletcher set the little girl down and began gathering supplies that the store owner was loading into his wagon. One of the middle children, a boy of perhaps 8, wandered toward the edge of the boardwalk. But Fletcher's hand shot out without him even looking, catching the boy's shoulder and pulling him back from the street where a horse and rider were passing. The gesture was automatic, protective, born of constant vigilance. "Come along, Miss Zimmerman," Mrs. Henderson said. "You will meet them soon enough. All 7 attend school when they can be spared from the ranch." The schoolhouse was a simple wooden building at the edge of town. One large room with a pot-bellied stove in the corner and rows of rough-hewn desks. A small room had been built onto the back, accessible by an outdoor staircase, and this was to be Beatrice's home. It contained a narrow bed, a washstand, a small stove, and a trunk for her belongings. A single window looked out over the prairie, and Beatrice stood there after Mrs. Henderson left, watching the sun sink toward the horizon and painting the grasslands gold. She had come here to escape her past, to build a new life where her inability to have children of her own would not mark her as incomplete. The doctors in Philadelphia had been clear after the illness that nearly killed her at 21. She would never carry a child. Her fiancé had been understanding at first, or so he claimed, but eventually the understanding had turned to resentment, and then to the announcement that he had found someone else, someone who could give him heirs. Beatrice pressed her hand against the window glass, still warm from the day's heat. She had always wanted to be a mother, and if biology denied her that path, then perhaps love could provide another way. She thought of the 7 children tumbling from the wagon, of the patient man who caught the wandering boy without even looking, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. Morning arrived with roosters crowing and the sound of wagon wheels on the dusty street. Beatrice dressed carefully in a simple gray dress with a white collar, pinned her honey-colored hair into a neat bun, and descended the stairs to the schoolhouse. Children were already beginning to arrive, some walking from homes in town, others delivered by parents from surrounding farms and ranches. And then the Jenkins children arrived, all 7 of them, climbing down from a wagon driven by the oldest girl, Caroline. Beatrice stood in the schoolhouse doorway and watched them approach. Caroline was thin and serious-faced, already carrying the weight of the world on her young shoulders. Behind her came a boy of about 12, then a girl of 10, then 3 more boys like stair-steps, and finally the smallest girl, the one Fletcher had carried on his hip the day before. "Good morning," Beatrice said warmly as they reached the steps. "You must be the Jenkins children." "I am Miss Zimmerman, your new teacher." Caroline studied her with eyes too old for her face. "Morning, miss. I am Caroline, and this is Thomas, Mary, John, Robert, Samuel, and little Margaret." "I am very pleased to meet you all," Beatrice said, crouching down so she was at eye level with Margaret, who regarded her solemnly with huge brown eyes. "What a pretty name you have, Margaret." "We call her Maggie," Samuel, who looked to be about 6, piped up. "She does not talk much." "Then we shall have to make sure she knows she is welcome to talk whenever she is ready," Beatrice said, standing. "Come inside, all of you. We have much to learn together." The school day revealed much to Beatrice about the Jenkins children. Caroline was whip-smart, able to calculate figures in her head faster than Beatrice could write them on the slate board. But she had huge gaps in her education, where she had been kept home to care for the younger children. Thomas was a dreamer, staring out the window at the sky more often than at his books, but when called upon, he could recite entire passages of literature from memory. Mary was artistic, filling the margins of her slate with tiny, perfect drawings of birds and flowers. The younger boys were energetic and mischievous, but eager to please, and little Maggie sat quietly, watching everything with those huge, serious eyes. At lunchtime, the children gathered outside under a cottonwood tree, and Beatrice noticed that the Jenkins children shared one pail among all 7 of them. Inside were biscuits and strips of dried beef, divided carefully so each child received an equal portion. It was not nearly enough food for growing children, Beatrice thought, and she found herself opening her own lunch pail and offering to share the boiled eggs and cheese she had purchased from Mrs. Henderson. "Father says we do not take charity," Caroline said stiffly, but her eyes lingered on the food with desperate hunger. "It is not charity," Beatrice said gently. "I packed far too much, and it will only go to waste if I cannot share it with friends." "You would be doing me a kindness by helping me eat it." Caroline hesitated, then nodded, and the younger children fell on the eggs and cheese with barely contained enthusiasm. Beatrice made a mental note to always pack extra, and to frame it as a favor to her rather than charity to them. The days fell into a rhythm. Beatrice taught her students reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography. She read to them from books she had brought from Philadelphia, opening up worlds beyond the Nebraska prairie. And every day, she watched the Jenkins children, seeing how Caroline's hands were rough from washing and mending clothes, how Thomas's eyes grew heavy in the afternoon from waking before dawn to do chores, how even little Maggie knew how to sit quietly and not cause trouble, because causing trouble meant making more work for everyone else. 3 weeks into the school term, Caroline did not arrive with the other children. Thomas drove the wagon, his young face tight with worry. "Caroline is sick," he told Beatrice quietly before school began. "Father wanted to stay home with her, but there is work that cannot wait on the ranch, and she insisted we come to school. Mary is watching her, but Mary is only 10, and I do not know what to do if Caroline gets worse." Beatrice made her decision instantly. "Class, today we are going to have a special lesson in practical sciences. Please bring your slates, and we are going to take a field trip to the Jenkins ranch." The children were delighted by this unexpected adventure, piling into wagons driven by some of the older students. Thomas looked at Beatrice with desperate gratitude, and she patted his shoulder reassuringly. The Jenkins ranch was about 5 miles from town, a collection of weathered buildings surrounded by prairie grassland. Cattle grazed in the distance, and chickens scratched in the yard. The house was small, clearly built for a much smaller family, and now bursting at the seams with 8 inhabitants. Beatrice sent the other students to document the types of grasses they could find, turning it into a botany lesson, while she entered the house with the Jenkins children. Inside, the home was painfully clean but desperately poor. Furniture had been mended multiple times, curtains were sewn from flour sacks, and the few decorations were clearly handmade. But there were also signs of love. Wildflowers in a jar on the table, drawings tacked to the walls, a row of carved wooden animals on the mantelpiece that someone had made with patient care. Caroline lay on a narrow bed in the corner, her face flushed with fever, her breathing labored. Mary sat beside her, looking terrified. "Mary, you did well taking care of your sister," Beatrice said, touching the girl's shoulder. "Now I need you to help me. Can you do that?" Mary nodded, relief flooding her face at having an adult take charge. Beatrice had helped nurse her own mother through illness and had volunteered at a charity hospital in Philadelphia. She examined Caroline quickly and recognized the signs of a serious fever, possibly influenza. The girl needed liquids, cooling compresses, and rest. "Thomas, I need you to fetch the doctor from town," Beatrice said. "Mary, help me get cool water from the well. John, Robert, Samuel, I need you to gather as many clean cloths as you can find." The children scattered to their tasks, grateful to have something to do. Little Maggie climbed onto the bed beside Caroline and took her big sister's hand, and Caroline's eyes fluttered open. "Miss Zimmerman," she whispered, confused. "What are you doing here?" "Taking care of you," Beatrice said firmly, beginning to bathe Caroline's face with cool water. "You have been taking care of everyone else for 4 years, Caroline. It is time someone took care of you." Tears leaked from Caroline's eyes. "Father needs me. The children need me. I cannot be sick." "Right now you need to be sick so you can get better," Beatrice said, "and I am here to help." "You are not alone, Caroline. Not anymore." She spent the day nursing Caroline, teaching the other students their lessons in the yard outside, and trying not to think about what would happen when Fletcher Jenkins came home and found her there. The doctor arrived and confirmed her diagnosis, leaving medicine and instructions. Thomas offered to drive the other students back to town, proving himself capable beyond his years, and Beatrice stayed. The sun was sinking toward the horizon when she heard the sound of a horse approaching. Through the window, she saw Fletcher Jenkins dismount, moving with the stiff weariness of a man who had been working since before dawn. He was dusty and tired, his hat pushed back on his head, and when he walked toward the house, his steps were heavy. Beatrice met him at the door, stepping outside so they could talk without disturbing Caroline. Fletcher stopped dead when he saw her, surprise crossing his face. Up close, he was younger than she had first thought, perhaps only 29 or 30, but his eyes were much older. They were dark brown, almost black, and filled with a weariness that went bone deep. "Miss Zimmerman," he said, his voice rough from the day's work and touched with a slight southern accent, remnants of a childhood spent somewhere farther south. "What are you doing here?" "Caroline is ill," Beatrice said gently. "I brought the class here for a field trip when Thomas told me, and I have been caring for her. The doctor has seen her, and he believes she will recover with rest and proper nursing." Fletcher closed his eyes briefly, and Beatrice saw his hands clench into fists at his sides. When he opened his eyes again, they were bright with unshed tears. "I should have known," he said. "She has been so tired lately, but she never complains, and there is so much work to be done." "I should have seen it." "You cannot see everything," Beatrice said. "You are one man trying to do the work of 2 parents, Fletcher. That is an impossible task." He looked at her sharply. "You do not know anything about my life or what I can or cannot do." "You are right," Beatrice said, not backing down. "But I know what I saw today. I saw children who are loved but overwhelmed. I saw a 14-year-old girl who has been carrying the weight of a household on her shoulders for 4 years. I saw a house that is clean and as comfortable as possible, but where there is never enough of anything. And I imagine when I talk to you, I will see a man who is exhausted and grieving and doing his absolute best, but who cannot do it all alone, no matter how hard he tries." Fletcher stared at her for a long moment, and then, to her surprise, his shoulders sagged. "You are not wrong," he said quietly. "But what am I supposed to do? I cannot afford to hire help, and there is no one else. Martha's family disowned her when she married me because I was just a ranch hand with nothing to my name, and my family is all dead. It is just me and the children, and I am failing them." "You are not failing them," Beatrice said firmly. "They are fed and clothed and clearly loved. But you do need help, Fletcher. Everyone needs help sometimes." He looked at her, really looked at her for the first time, and Beatrice felt something shift in her chest. There was pain in his eyes, yes, but also strength and determination and a deep well of love for his children. "Why did you stay?" he asked. "You could have sent for me, gone back to town. Instead, you stayed all day with my sick daughter, teaching my children, caring for them. Why?" Beatrice thought about the empty ache in her chest, the longing for children she would never bear, the feeling of rightness she had experienced all day as she cared for the Jenkins family. "Because I wanted to," she said simply. Because when I look at your children, I see 7 souls who deserve every chance in the world, and because when I imagined leaving Caroline alone with only Mary to care for her, I could not do it. Fletcher was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Come inside. Let me see my daughter, and then I will drive you back to town. It will be dark soon. Inside, Caroline was sleeping peacefully, her fever already beginning to break thanks to the medicine and the careful nursing. The other children were sitting at the table, and Beatrice realized with a start that Mary had managed to prepare a simple dinner of beans and cornbread. We ate already, Father, Thomas said. There is some left for you and Miss Zimmerman. I should go, Beatrice said, but her stomach betrayed her with a loud growl, and Fletcher's mouth twitched in what might have been the beginning of a smile. You spent the day caring for my family, he said. The least I can do is feed you. Please sit. They sat at the crowded table, children squeezing together to make room, and ate the simple meal. Beatrice listened as the children told their father about their day, about the grasses they had identified, about how Miss Zimmerman had known exactly what to do for Caroline, about how she had taught them lessons right there in the yard. Fletcher listened, his eyes moving from child to child, and Beatrice saw the love in his face, naked and unguarded. After dinner, Fletcher hitched up his wagon to drive Beatrice back to town. Little Maggie surprised everyone by climbing into Beatrice's lap and refusing to move. So she rode the 5 miles with the small, warm body pressed against hers, breathing in the scent of sunshine and little girl. Fletcher drove in silence for most of the journey, but as they reached the edge of town, he spoke. Thank you, he said, for today, for caring about them, for seeing that they needed help and giving it without being asked. I will always help them if I can, Beatrice said. They are special children, Fletcher. You should be very proud. I am, he said, but I am also terrified every single day that I am not enough, that I am going to fail them somehow. Beatrice shifted Maggie in her lap, the little girl now sleeping soundly. May I be honest with you, Fletcher? He glanced at her, surprised. Of course. You cannot be both father and mother to them, no matter how hard you try. It is not a failing on your part, it is simply impossible. But that does not mean you have to do this alone. There are people who would help if you let them. I do not take charity, Fletcher said, his voice stiff. I am not talking about charity, Beatrice said. I am talking about community, about friendship, about letting people care for you and your children because they want to, not because you are a charity case. He pulled the wagon to a stop outside the schoolhouse and sat for a moment, looking at his hands on the reins. I have been alone for so long, he said quietly. I do not know how to be anything else anymore. Beatrice carefully lifted Maggie and passed her to Fletcher, their hands brushing in the transfer. Even that brief touch sent warmth through her, and she saw his eyes widen slightly as if he had felt it too. You do not have to be alone, she said softly. Not anymore. She climbed down from the wagon and stood in the street, watching as Fletcher drove away with Maggie sleeping against his shoulder. Her heart was pounding and her arms felt empty without the little girl's weight, but something had shifted inside her. Something had begun. Over the following weeks, Beatrice found reasons to visit the Jenkins ranch. She brought books for the children, claiming she needed them returned quickly. She arrived with baskets of food, saying she had overpurchased at the general store. She offered to help with mending and laundry on Saturday afternoons, insisting that it was good practice for teaching the girls proper domestic skills. Fletcher accepted her help with increasing ease, and Beatrice began to see the man beneath the exhaustion. He was intelligent, with a quick wit that emerged when he was not too tired to use it. He read voraciously, borrowing books from Beatrice and discussing them with her while they worked side by side. He had grown up in Tennessee, He told her one afternoon while they hung laundry together, the youngest son of a poor farmer. When his parents died, he had headed west looking for opportunity and had ended up working on a ranch in Nebraska. That was where he had met Martha, the daughter of a wealthy rancher who had fallen in love with the poor cowboy despite her father's fury. Her father told her she was dead to him the day we married, Fletcher said, pinning a sheet to the line. She gave up everything for me, her family, her inheritance, all of it, and I could not even keep her alive. You did not kill her, Fletcher, Beatrice said gently. Childbirth is dangerous. It is not your fault. I got her pregnant 7 times, Fletcher said, his voice raw. 7 times I put her through that danger, and the last time it killed her. How is that not my fault? Beatrice stopped what she was doing and turned to face him. Did Martha want children? Fletcher looked startled by the question. Of course she did. She loved being a mother. Then she made a choice, Beatrice said. A choice to have a family with you, knowing the risks. That was her decision, Fletcher, made out of love. You cannot take that choice away from her by drowning in guilt. He stared at her, emotions warring across his face. How do you know what to say? He asked. How do you always know exactly what I need to hear? I do not always know, Beatrice admitted. But I am learning you, Fletcher Jenkins. I am learning what makes you smile, what makes you sad, what keeps you up at night worrying. And I find that I want to keep learning if you will let me. Something shifted in his eyes, a spark of hope fighting through the weariness. Why? He asked. Why do you care so much about us, about me? Beatrice took a breath, deciding to be brave. Because when I am with you and your children, I feel complete in a way I have never felt before. Because I came to Nebraska running from a life where I was told I was not enough, and here, with all of you, I feel like I am exactly enough. Because I look at you and I see a good man who deserves to be happy, and I want to be part of that happiness. Fletcher closed the distance between them, reaching out to touch her face with calloused, gentle fingers. Beatrice, he said, her name soft in his mouth. I am a widower with 7 children and a struggling ranch. I have nothing to offer you, nothing except more work and more worry and more mouths to feed. You have everything to offer me, Beatrice said, leaning into his touch. You have those 7 beautiful children who I am already falling in love with. You have yourself, and Fletcher, you are more than enough. You are everything. He kissed her then, soft and tentative, like a man who had forgotten how to be gentle with himself, who had forgotten that he deserved gentleness from others. Beatrice kissed him back, pouring all of her longing and hope and love into it, and when they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. I cannot promise you an easy life, Fletcher said, his forehead resting against hers. But I can promise you that I will love you with everything I have if you are willing to take that chance. I am willing, Beatrice said. I have been waiting my whole life to find you, Fletcher. I am not going to walk away now. They married 6 weeks later in the little church at the end of Wood River's Main Street. All 7 Jenkins children stood with them, Caroline and Thomas as official witnesses, the younger ones fidgeting in their Sunday best, but beaming with joy. The entire town turned out for the wedding, curious about the Eastern schoolteacher who had captured the heart of their most stoic rancher. Beatrice wore a simple dress of cream-colored muslin that she had sewn herself with help from Caroline and Mary. Fletcher wore his best suit, his dark hair neatly combed, his eyes never leaving Beatrice's face as she walked down the aisle toward him. When the minister asked if he took this woman to be his wife, Fletcher's voice was strong and sure. I do, he said. With all my heart, I do. And when Beatrice said the same words, pledging herself to this man and his children, to this new life she was choosing, she felt the empty ache in her chest finally begin to fill. The wedding supper was held at the ranch, with neighbors bringing food and music. Beatrice danced with Fletcher in the yard while the children watched and laughed, and then she danced with each of the children in turn. When she swayed with little Maggie, the child wrapped her arms tight around Beatrice's neck and whispered, "Mama," so softly that Beatrice almost thought she had imagined it, but she had not imagined it because Maggie said it again, louder this time. "Mama." Beatrice burst into tears, clutching the little girl close, and when she looked up, Fletcher was watching them with his own eyes wet. That night, after the guests had gone and the children were in bed, Fletcher and Beatrice stood together on the porch of their home, looking out at the star-scattered sky. "Are you scared?" Fletcher asked, his arm around her waist. "Taking on all of this, me and 7 children and a ranch that barely makes ends meet." "Terrified," Beatrice admitted, "but also happier than I have ever been in my life. I have everything I ever wanted, Fletcher. A family, children to love, a man who looks at me like I hung the moon. How could I be anything but grateful?" "I am the one who is grateful," Fletcher said, turning her to face him. "You gave me back something I thought I had lost forever when Martha died. You gave me hope. You gave my children a mother. You gave us all a future." "We gave each other those things," Beatrice corrected, rising on her toes to kiss him. "We are a family now, Fletcher. We do this together." The first months of marriage were an adjustment. Beatrice had to learn the rhythms of ranch life, had to figure out how to cook for 9 people instead of 1, had to navigate the complex dynamics of 7 children with different needs and personalities. There were moments when she felt overwhelmed, when the work seemed endless and she wondered if she had made a mistake. But then Caroline would smile at her, really smile, the weight lifting from her young shoulders now that she was not solely responsible for her siblings. Thomas would bring her wildflowers he had picked on the range, thanking her for making his father laugh again. Mary would climb into her lap in the evenings and ask her to tell stories about Philadelphia, hungry for knowledge of the wider world. The younger boys would race to show her their accomplishments, seeking her praise and approval. And Maggie, sweet Maggie, followed her everywhere, calling her mama with increasing confidence. And Fletcher. Fletcher looked at her like she was a miracle, like he could not quite believe she was real and there in his. He was attentive and loving, thoughtful in ways that surprised her. He would wake early to make coffee so she could sleep an extra half hour. He would take over the bedtime routine with the younger children when he saw her flagging. He would pull her into quiet corners of the house to steal kisses, whispering how much he loved her, how grateful he was for her. 6 months into their marriage, Beatrice woke feeling nauseated. She lay in bed for a moment, feeling Fletcher's warm weight beside her, and tried to remember if she had eaten something bad. But the nausea persisted, and over the following days it became a pattern. Mornings were the worst, and she found herself having to excuse herself from breakfast preparation to be sick in the basin. Caroline noticed first, her eyes knowing. "Miss Beatrice, I mean Mama," she said, the title still new on her tongue. "Are you all right? You have been sick every morning for a week." Beatrice opened her mouth to reassure her, then stopped. She counted back days in her head, realized what she had been too busy to notice before. It was impossible. The doctors had been clear. She could not have children. But her body was telling her a different story. She went to see the doctor in town, making the trip alone while Fletcher was out mending fences and the children were at school. Dr. Harrison was the same physician who had treated Caroline's fever, a kind man in his 60s with gentle hands and a reassuring manner. He examined her carefully, asked questions, and then sat back with a smile. "Mrs. Jenkins, congratulations. You are going to have a baby. I would estimate you are about 8 weeks along, which means you can expect to deliver in early spring." Beatrice stared at him, unable to process the words. "That is impossible," she whispered. "I was told I could never have children. The doctors in Philadelphia were certain, Dr." Harrison shrugged. "Medicine is not an exact science, Mrs. Jenkins. Sometimes the body heals in ways we do not expect. Sometimes what seems impossible becomes possible. You are young and healthy, and all signs indicate this is a strong, healthy pregnancy. I see no reason to believe you will not carry this child to term successfully." Beatrice left the doctor's office in a daze. She was going to have a baby of her own body, something she had mourned as lost forever. And not just that, but she would be bringing this child into a family, into a home already filled with love and noise, and 7 other children who would be siblings to this new little one. She did not tell Fletcher immediately. She wanted to find the right moment, wanted to give him this news in a way that honored how miraculous it was. That evening, after the children were in bed, she asked him to walk with her. They strolled down to the creek that ran through the property, the autumn air crisp and cool, the stars bright overhead. "Fletcher," Beatrice said, taking his hand, "I have something to tell you." He turned to her, concern immediately crossing his face. "What is it? Are you all right?" "You have seemed tired lately, and I have been worried." "I am more than all right," Beatrice said, smiling. "Fletcher, I am pregnant. We are going to have a baby." He froze, his hand tightening on hers. "What? But I thought you could not. I thought the doctors said." "They did say that," Beatrice confirmed. "But apparently they were wrong. I saw Dr. Harrison today, and he confirmed it. I am about 8 weeks along. The baby will come in the spring." Fletcher made a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. When he pulled back, his face was wet with tears. "Another child," he said wonderingly. "I never thought, after Martha, after losing her that way, I never thought I would have another child. And now, with you, I am getting everything I thought was lost to me. Beatrice, you are a miracle. You are my miracle." "We are each other's miracles," Beatrice said, wiping the tears from his cheeks. "We found each other when we both thought we would be alone. We built this family together, and now we are adding to it, growing it, making it even stronger." They told the children the next morning at breakfast. The reactions were mixed and immediate. Caroline cried happy tears and hugged Beatrice tightly. Thomas looked proud, as if he had personally accomplished something remarkable. Mary wanted to know if the baby would be a girl so she could teach her to draw. The younger boys were excited about having someone smaller than them in the house. And Maggie, sweet Maggie, put her hand on Beatrice's still flat stomach and said, "My baby," with such fierce protectiveness that everyone laughed. The pregnancy was not easy. Beatrice was sick for the first 4 months, exhausted for most of the remainder, and by the final weeks, she was uncomfortable and huge and ready to be done. But Fletcher was devoted, taking on extra work around the house, rubbing her swollen feet in the evenings, reassuring her when she worried about the delivery. "I am scared," she admitted one night in late February, her hands on her enormous belly. "Martha died this way, Fletcher." "What if something goes wrong?" Fletcher took her face in his hands, his eyes serious and steady. "Nothing is going to go wrong," he said firmly. "Dr. Harrison says you are healthy and the baby is strong. You are going to be fine, Beatrice. You are going to bring our child into this world, and then you are going to raise him or her with all the love and strength you have shown every day since you came into our lives. I believe in you." His faith gave her courage. When the pain started on a cold March morning, Beatrice was ready. Fletcher sent Thomas racing to town for the doctor while Caroline took charge of the younger children, keeping them calm and occupied. Fletcher stayed with Beatrice, holding her hand, supporting her through each contraction, whispering encouragement and love. The labor was long and difficult, lasting from dawn until well into the night. There were moments when Beatrice was certain she could not continue, when the pain seemed too much to bear. But Fletcher never left her side, never stopped believing in her, and finally, as the clock struck midnight, Beatrice gave one final push and heard the most beautiful sound in the world, a baby's cry. "It is a boy," Dr. Harrison announced, placing the red-faced, squalling infant in Beatrice's arms. A healthy, strong boy. Beatrice looked down at her son, at his tiny, perfect face and his shock of dark hair, and felt her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. Fletcher leaned over them both, his finger touching their son's miniature hand, and when the baby grasped it instinctively, Fletcher broke down completely. "He is perfect," Fletcher whispered through his tears. "Beatrice, he is absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Beatrice asked, exhausted but filled with joy. Fletcher thought for a moment, then smiled. "What about Benjamin? It means beloved, and he is certainly that already." "Benjamin Jenkins," Beatrice said, testing the name. "Yes, I love it. Welcome to the world, Benjamin. You have 7 siblings who are very excited to meet you." The children were allowed in one by one to meet their new brother. Caroline held him with the expertise of someone who had raised babies before, tears streaming down her face. Thomas touched his head reverently, amazed by how small he was. Mary declared him the most beautiful baby ever born. The younger boys wanted to know when he would be big enough to play with them. And Maggie, who had appointed herself Benjamin's special protector from the moment of his birth, kissed his forehead and said, "My baby brother." Beatrice recovered quickly from the birth, much to Dr. Harrison's satisfaction and Fletcher's relief. Within weeks, she was back to managing the household, though now with an infant to care for as well. It should have been overwhelming, 8 children in a house and a ranch, but instead, Beatrice found it fulfilling in ways she had never imagined. She loved nursing Benjamin in the quiet pre-dawn hours, the house still asleep around them. She loved watching Fletcher with their son, seeing the gentle wonder in his eyes as he held this tiny life they had created together. She loved seeing the older children dote on their baby brother, each of them finding ways to help and contribute. Caroline, especially, blossomed under the new arrangement. With Beatrice there to handle the household management and childcare, Caroline was able to be 14 years old again. She spent more time with friends from school, took up painting with Mary, and even started stepping out with a nice young man from a neighboring ranch when she turned 16. Beatrice watched her grow from a careworn child into a lovely young woman, and felt pride that she had been able to give her back those lost years of youth. Thomas discovered he had a gift for working with horses and began helping Fletcher train the ranch stock. He was patient and gentle, with an intuitive understanding of the animals that Fletcher said was rare. Mary's artistic talents flourished under Beatrice's encouragement, and her drawings became good enough that the general store began displaying and selling them to travelers passing through. The younger boys grew tall and strong and wild, always into mischief but full of love and loyalty. And Maggie remained Beatrice's shadow, helping with Benjamin and slowly coming out of her shell. The ranch began to prosper under Fletcher's careful management and Beatrice's financial planning. She took over the accounts, discovering she had a head for numbers that served them well. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, able to afford small luxuries like new clothes for the children and books for the family library that Beatrice was slowly building. 2 years after Benjamin's birth, Beatrice found herself pregnant again. This time there was no shock, only joy. Fletcher was thrilled, the children were excited, and Beatrice felt blessed beyond measure. The pregnancy was easier than the first, and the labor, while still difficult, went more smoothly. This time they welcomed a daughter, a tiny thing with Beatrice's honey-colored hair and Fletcher's dark eyes. They named her Martha Rose, after Fletcher's first wife and after the prairie flowers that Beatrice loved. Beatrice had suggested the name, wanting Fletcher's children to remember their mother, and Fletcher had wept and thanked her for her generous heart. "You are not threatened by her memory?" he had asked, holding their daughter close. "How could I be?" Beatrice replied. "Martha gave you those 7 beautiful children. She loved you and built a life with you. I am grateful to her, Fletcher. I wish she could have lived to see them grow, but since she could not, I am honored to stand in her place and love them as she would have." Little Martha became the darling of the family, spoiled by her older siblings and doted on by her parents. She was a happy baby who laughed easily and charmed everyone she met. Maggie, now 8 years old, appointed herself Martha's guardian just as she had for Benjamin, and the 2 younger children were rarely seen without her hovering nearby. The years passed in a blur of activity and love. Caroline married her young man and moved to a ranch 10 miles away, but visited often with her own children in tow. Thomas took over more and more of the ranch operations, as Fletcher's body began to feel the years of hard labor. Mary won a scholarship to an art school in Omaha and returned each summer with new skills and ideas. The younger boys grew into responsible young men, each finding their own path while remaining close to the family. Maggie became a teacher herself, working alongside Beatrice at the school. Benjamin and Martha grew tall and healthy, surrounded by love and siblings. Fletcher and Beatrice grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They had weathered hard times, drought years when the cattle died and the crops failed, harsh winters when they struggled to keep everyone fed and warm, illnesses and injuries, and all the thousand small crises of a large family. But they had weathered them together, supporting each other, loving each other through it all. On their 20th anniversary, Fletcher took Beatrice to the creek where he had first learned she was pregnant with Benjamin. They were both graying now, their faces lined with the marks of hard work and good laughter, their hands calloused and work worn. 20 years, Fletcher said, his arm around her waist as they watched the water flow past. 20 years since you came into my life and changed everything. You changed my life too, Beatrice said, leaning her head on his shoulder. I came to Nebraska thinking I was running away from pain, but I was really running toward this, toward you, toward our family, toward the life we built together. You have any regrets? Fletcher asked. About giving up teaching full-time, about taking on 7 children who were not yours, about the hard life on this ranch. Beatrice turned to face him, taking his weathered face in her hands. Not a single regret, Fletcher Jenkins. This life with you, with our children, all 9 of them, is more than I ever dreamed of. You gave me everything I thought I could never have, a family, children, love. How could I possibly regret that? He kissed her then, soft and sweet, the kiss of a man who still loved his wife as much after 20 years as he had on their wedding day. I love you, Beatrice. For 20 years, you have been my partner, my best friend, the mother to my children, the love of my life. Here is to 20 more years and then 20 more after that. I will love you forever, Fletcher, Beatrice promised. In this life and whatever comes after, you and our children, all of you, you are my heart. They stood there as the sun set. 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a family from loss and love, who had proven that the heart is big enough to hold as much love as you are willing to give. 7 children Fletcher had brought to their union, 2 more they had created together, and every single one of them had been loved completely, fully, without reservation. As they walked back to the house, Beatrice could see lights in the windows and hear the sounds of their family inside. Benjamin was playing his guitar, teaching Martha a new song. Maggie was reading to some of the younger grandchildren who were visiting. The older children were gathered around the table, laughing and talking and being together. Beatrice had come to Wood River with empty arms and a heart aching to love. She had found a cowboy with 7 kids and no wife, a man who was drowning in grief and responsibility. And together, they had built something beautiful. They had built a family. They had built a life. They had built a love that would endure through all the challenges the frontier could throw at them. She thought about the girl she had been, stepping off that stagecoach in 1878, scared and uncertain and hoping for a fresh start. She thought about the woman she had become, confident and capable and surrounded by love. She thought about Fletcher, about the journey from that first day when he had caught his wandering son without looking, to now, 20 years and a lifetime of love later. Her heart had been big enough for all 8 of them, just as the story said it would be. Fletcher, Caroline, Thomas, Mary, John, Robert, Samuel, Maggie, and eventually Benjamin and Martha too. Her heart had stretched and grown to hold them all, and in return they had filled all the empty places inside her. As they reached the porch, Fletcher paused and pulled Beatrice close one more time. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair, "for seeing us, for loving us, for staying." "Thank you," Beatrice whispered back, "for giving me a reason to stay, for trusting me with your children, for loving me even when I was afraid to be loved." They went inside together, into the warm glow of their home, into the noise and laughter of their family. And Beatrice knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Empty arms had been filled, a grieving heart had been healed, and love, that most powerful force in all the world, had conquered loneliness and loss and created something lasting and true. The prairie stretched out beyond their windows, vast and wild and beautiful, just as it had been that first day. But Beatrice was no longer looking at it with the eyes of a stranger. She was looking at it with the eyes of someone who belonged, someone who had found home in the most unexpected place, with the most unexpected family. And as the evening deepened and the stars came out, as the family gathered for dinner and stories and the comfortable rhythms of love, Beatrice sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. For Fletcher, for their 9 children, for this life that had seemed impossible but had become her everything. She had come to the Wild West looking for a fresh start, and she had found her forever. She had found her family. She had found her heart's home,